Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Fire Breathing Rob. Please like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube and definitely share them. They're with amazing people that do amazing things all over the country and all over the world. So thank you for that. We have somebody coming to us right now, I believe from Canada. Am I correct, David?
Yes, that's right, in Toronto.
Thank you for that. So everyone, this is David Albertyn, and he is the author of the new book that just came out. It's called Undercard. It's a book about boxing. We're going to talk and dive right into that. So David, first of all, thanks for coming on the program. We greatly appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, Rob. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. I like the shows. I've been watching them.
All right, thanks so much. So David, let's talk about this. You know, this book is about boxing, but before we even get into the book, can you tell the viewers a little bit about you? You are from South Africa, and now you're in Canada. So how is that journey possible?
Basically, yeah, I was born in South Africa. My family's been in South Africa it came from various places, but some lines for like 300 years. The first Albertyn came 300 years ago to South Africa. So in 1993, we left. We moved to Toronto, Canada, and we joined some relatives there. And then I was 10 years old at the time, and then grew up in Canada. And then I always wanted to be a writer. And I became a tennis coach after university. I became a tennis coach. It's sort of like my day job, and been involved in sports a lot, competed in various sports. And I just thought, so with this book, I wanted to kind of hit all the different sides of myself, but I was always trying to be a writer, and then finally got published, and it's going well.
Right. So as you said, you were a tennis guy. You played tennis, coached tennis. So why write a book about boxing?
Tennis, yeah. Oh, and can I just show this is the book? If anyone
Sure,
wants
yeah,
to see
please.
it. Yeah, and it's a nice, really nice cover by my publisher, House of Nancy. Well, I've been a fan of boxing since I was a kid. You know, my dad we watched fights way back in South Africa. Talked to me about it, and I did the first thing we did when we came to Canada, my dad actually bought me a punching bag, and we hung it up in the garage. I would practice on that. So I was always a fan of it. I did, summers I'd practice with friends. We'd practice boxing in high school. And then I did a bit of training just for cross training. But more just, when I started constructing the story, I knew I wanted to tell about 4 characters, all from different backgrounds. And I wanted each of them to be an athlete in a different sport. So one of the main characters, he was a tennis player, although it's barely mentioned. We got the female lead. She was in the WNBA, and now she's a basketball coach. The one character, he was a decathlete, and then the one character, he's a boxer. But because I said in Vegas, that's when I thought boxing would be the feature sport. But the one other aspect is just the whole business side of boxing. You know, it's so different to other sports. You know, and it's so like kind of wacky and interesting. You know how fighters don't fight each other. I mean, what other sport, you know, would you have like the 2 best NBA teams not play each other because their management don't like each other? You know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
all those things, it's just great for storytelling. So that's how boxing became the featured sport, but there is a lot of sports in it.
I wanted to ask you this. Obviously, Undercard is your first novel. What made you want to write a fiction story or instead of like a nonfiction story about a boxer that you may enjoy, or a sports athlete that you may have, liked in general throughout your lifetime?
Pretty much, I always wanted to write fiction. I was always telling stories. I was always into that, and I always wanted to write sort of like exciting, like dynamic stories. And so yeah, that's always what I've been doing. But I do want to write nonfiction at some point. But it'll probably be the next couple books will be fiction. And I would like to write about tennis. I learned a lot, just about that industry. But yeah, I mean, storytelling has just been a huge part of my life. So that's how it ended up that way. Yeah.
How did you deal with putting those two together, to make the book a little bit of a thriller, but also to touch on those big things that have been going on in talking about America in our country for hundreds of years, rather, with that racial injustice? We've seen the slave aspect, and also right now with the police brutality. So how did you and why did you want to incorporate those 2 themes together so much?
Right. Well, basically, my father, he was involved in the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa and fought for change. And there was a thing in the apartheid days called banning. You get like a banning order. so, and it would be called, you were banned. So my father was banned for 5 years, and what it meant was like your freedoms were basically like restricted, and the security police kind of watched you and monitored you, and all your movements had to be monitored, and you had to let them know anything you did. Like when my dad's sister got married, my parents, like, he had to go to the judge and say, are we allowed to go to another city for my sister's wedding, you know? And they said, oh, and then come straight back. And one thing, he was allowed to work, but he couldn't be with more than one person at a time. That was the rule. So he didn't, like, I guess, talk, you know, anti-apartheid stuff. So he says one time they went to the public swimming pool. It's like my mom, my dad, and their friend, another couple. And he had to sit at one end of the pool. And
Wow.
and my mom and the friend sat at the other. And then there's two, like, security police guys in suits. Everyone else bathing suits, just sitting by the pool watching them. So there's a bunch of wacky stories like that. But anyway, so I grew up in a context of very much of all my parents' friends had been part of the anti-apartheid struggle and really had been fighting for change. And some of them, you know, had had tough times from the government because of that. So it was very much always a sense of that, you know, that you should be fighting for positive change, regardless if you're the one on the receiving end of the injustice. You know, it was something that was really drilled into me from a young age. So then I guess I always wanted to include that into my writing and into my storytelling. And then as I grew older, I had a couple stories that didn't get published before. But the one, it was set in Africa, and I learned a lot about colonialism, neocolonialism, things like that. So that further kind of really,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, further really developed my interest in kind of this subject matter and these issues and really confronting these issues. And so yeah, I guess, yeah. So for me, someone who's always loved exciting, dynamic storytelling, you know, edge of your seat stuff, type stuff, action scenes, but then also really having this strong kind of desire for positive change and things. I really wanted to marry the two, and what I'd love is with my story, if you read it just superficially, you'd have a great time, and if you read it just for the depth, you'd have a great time. And then ideally, you put it together, it's a meaningful and exciting experience. So that was it.
David, I want to talk about this in general. You know, we see a lot of these issues, like I said, in America right now with the racial injustice and police brutality going on. Now, you grew up in South Africa. We hear about the apartheid, as you just brought that up, and you talked about your family having to deal with that and fighting for change in South Africa. Can you talk about that and how that, you know, I know you based the book on that, but can you speak about, you know, looking at America now, do you see the same kind of injustices that were in South Africa also in America at this point in time, or is it a lot different?
I think there's a lot of similarities. I mean, I think
Okay.
definitely, you know, there's separate countries with separate histories
Right.
and things. But I think in the main thing of just injustice on inequality along economic lines and along racial lines, and then obviously a number of others, you know, that feels very similar. And I have had, so I've spent quite a lot of time in the States, you know, with tennis. I was staying down there quite a bit in Texas and Florida and all over the US, New York. And you know, just driving through the US, you know, I've had a lot of experiences, you know what I mean? So it's a combination really with the book of a lot of research, but a lot of my own personal experiences kind of informed it. And yeah, like, you know, Miami, you just constantly, and it's set in Vegas. You know, Vegas, you got the ultimate wealth and opulence, you know, and then still like marginalized communities and things like that. So that dichotomy, I think, and I think also just the thing you learn coming from South Africa is that if you don't address these issues of inequality, the problems are just going to keep, if you just allow it to keep festering, it'll just keep getting worse and worse. And that it really is in the best interest of everyone, not just the people who are being marginalized, to make positive change, you know, and it's just going to be a better society for everybody.
Do you worry about, you know, writing a book as a person that's white with your three main characters are people of color, that people will say, well, what, you know, what does this guy really know about black people, police brutality? I mean, I'm sure it's something that maybe if somebody doesn't say it to you, David, that they're really thinking of it. And you know, anybody that's white, you know, that's even, you know, fighting for these people, I'm sure some people have thought about this. So what would you say to somebody that say, hey, this guy's writing a book about people of color, black people in general, the three main characters are black, and
Well, there's
he's
four main
he's a
characters.
white guy.
There's four main characters, and
Four
one
main
is
characters. I'm sorry.
yeah, and one's white, and the other three are of people of color. So yeah, it's a great point, and it's definitely something I think about, and definitely something people have raised with me. And first of all, I had the idea for this book 2014, so it's I
Oh,
started writing it, and I started writing it, developing the idea, and started writing it in 2016. So even though it's kind of a big coincidence is coming out now, but I mean, for me, it was in development and the research and the ideas from a long time past. But I would say that really my focus is on inequality, and I'm not trying to tell anyone else's story or do anything, but just really look at the issue
yeah.
of inequality and how it manifests in an urban setting. That's what I wanted to look at from different perspectives, from a variety of perspectives. And so, I mean, obviously I did as much diligence as I possibly could, but it really came about looking at from that. But if you're going to look at inequality in an urban setting in America and pretty much the whole world, automatically you're going to touch on issues of race and marginalization, marginalized communities. So it would be, I mean, from my end, being a writer, I feel like if I didn't touch on these issues, it would be irresponsible if you're trying to deal with the issue of inequality. So, but that being said, it's still, it's done from the perspective of, I mean, a lot is drawn from my experiences, and it's really focusing on the issue. And it's not, one of the things I was very careful to do is that my characters are more learning. They're coming from a position outside. One character, the main black character, Tyron, he's coming from the military. He's been in the Middle East fighting the wars. He just comes back, and he's an outsider to what's going on. So even though he's black, he's learning about what's going on, and that's a very similar position to that what I'm in. So a lot of conscious choices in terms of being as respectful and conscientious and caring as I possibly could be.
How would you really portray a character that served in the military, such as Tyron, with not that real in-depth experience of that service yourself?
Yeah, well, for one thing, I lived with soldiers in the U.S. for a period.
Oh, wow.
Various times, just by chance, but it was great. I got to learn a lot from that. And then I also have, when you're in the crime fiction world, there's a lot of writers in the crime fiction world who have military background or policing background and stuff. So, and then obviously, it's those experiences, conferring with my writer friends, and then obviously just my military friends, and then obviously just as much research as I possibly can. So, I mean, one thing I feel like is if you're going to do a large story, no one human being, as soon as the story kind of opens up, is going to have firsthand experience of absolutely every single aspect. So there's definitely a lot of things in the book that I do have firsthand experience on, but whatever I don't, it's, a really relentless effort to kind of shore up my knowledge with other people's expertise and with my research.
How hard was it to, find that topic that you really wanted to write about, research it, write it, get it published? I mean, it seems like an exhausting process.
Oh.
How was all that?
Yeah, exhausting is a good word. It's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, with this, what I feel like, what I'm so happy about the book is I kind of had so many ideas lingering in my head. You know what I mean? For a long time, and as I was developing the story, it was like incredible that I realized I could basically weave so many of these ideas together. I'll just tell one thing. I trained for a little bit in a high performance gym in the main tennis stadium where they had the pro event in Toronto. And so I every time I went there, you go like through the tunnels inside these stadiums, and all these stadiums in these back tunnels, it's like really cool. And if no one's around, it's like very eerie. These like more like kind of like futuristic tunnels, you know what I mean, inside the stadium, and like very like sleek and cool looking. And every time I went there, I was like, this would be such a great place to set a story. That you have this like major sports event going on, and then this big time kind of like the real action's going behind the scenes. So that was an idea that was lingering me, and was a big kind of inspiration just in terms of plot for Undercard. The other thing was, like I said, I really wanted to deal with inequality in an urban setting and the nature of policies that were kind of marginalizing people in an urban setting. I wanted to do something like that. I also wanted to do a 24-hour story. In this story, while there's flashbacks and you kind of get these characters' entire lives, the whole thing starts noon Saturday, ends noon Sunday. So So yeah, all those things help sustain you. But I mean, it's kind of brutal. I'll be honest. It's so exhausting. Just so many steps, so many difficult steps. But it's really fun now. You know, this is like the part to enjoy.
Now, this is your first book out. It's done extremely well in Canada.
Mhm.
It's coming out in America right now for the publication. What do you expect it to do in America? Do you expect it to really hit high, especially like you said, during this time of racial injustice, police brutality, and as you said, this story really hits all those ideas.
Yeah, well, on the one thing, I mean, I definitely don't want to be capitalizing on that aspect, you know, because
Yeah,
it's
right.
yeah, because it's yeah, so I'm not focusing on that. But in general, I try not to focus on results at all,
Mhm.
because I just feel like it's easier that way, and I just try and you know, promote as much as possible. And really, my main motivation, my main focus in terms of the how it does is just that it does well enough that I get another opportunity to write another book, you know, because you know, this is what I've wanted to do for a long time, so it's really fun now to be able to be in it.
So we have a lot of young people that listen in college. As publishing your first book, David, what would you tell young people that are in college, even high school students that are listening, that want to really get into writing? They enjoy it. They enjoy reading books in general. What tips would you give them as far as, you know, the exhausting process that you actually just spoke about of how to get through that first publication of a book?
Right. I would say one, I would say most important thing is keep improving. Keep improving. And I would say the improvement will probably look different depending on what style of writer you want to be. You know, some people, depending on the genre, it might be that you want to be more prolific so that you can do a higher output. Some, you know, if it's different, you want to increase the literary merit. But whatever aspect of the style you want to write, whether it's journalism or novels or whatever stories, just keep pushing yourself to improve, you know, and that's how you're going to get results. The other thing I'd say is make sure you stay strong, because you're going to get so much rejection, adversity. I mean, you really need to develop like a resilience and fortitude that is, you know, amazing. And the last thing I'd say is really try and develop habits, you know, and keep your workspace tidy, and try and write at the same time of day if possible, so that it just becomes ingrained to write in those periods. And yeah, and just stay strong. Yeah, stay strong, because it's a great thing. It's a great thing, regardless of what results come.
David Albertyn here on Fire Breather Rob. Just two questions left, and thanks so much for your time. I want to talk about, you know, we know this book just came out. It's about to come out for the American publication soon.
Oh,
With that said, what are you looking for as far as your next book? I know it might be a little early to even speak about that, but if that's so, that's fine. But in general, do you have any kind of other niche that you're going to be looking at? I know you said fiction again, but are
yeah,
we going to look back to writing more about tennis or other sports or a different subject?
yeah. So the
What?
next one I think is going to be more tennis world. It's still going to be crime fiction, but I think it's going to be a lot more funny. It's going to be, because this is a very intense book. If you read it, you'll find it's very intense, and it was quite emotionally to write something so intense was quite emotionally taxing, you know. And um, so I really wanted to write something like funny. So it's still crime fiction, but it's a lot more sex, it's a lot more humor, and it's set in the sort of tennis club world, which I know well
Right.
as a coach. So, and I think I'm quite a bit along already, and I think it could be really a lot of fun. So you know, keep an eye out.
So, David, as we go, as far as the interview goes, can you tell the viewers where they can buy your book, when it's coming out, as far as the U.S. publication, and
Yeah.
where
So you
people can find more about you?
okay? Thanks so much. Yeah. So US, it's so it is out. It's out June 2nd. It came out here,
Oh, okay.
and my website is davidalbertyn.com. So just my name.com, and last name Albertyn. And same, my Twitter and Instagram is also at David Albertyn. Although there's links on the site, and then on the site, if you go to the book page, there's links to all the retailers. But it's basically available Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I mean, all the IndieBound bookshop, all the basically digital retailers. It's available right now.
Right, David, hey, thanks so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. And if you're definitely looking for a good book to read, I'm definitely going to try to get my hands on it within the next couple of days.